Have a look at the new Genesis G80. And there's also a brand new SUV from Genesis based on this platform called the GV80. And click on the card here if you want to watch that review. And the reason why Genesis brought out the G80 and the GV80 before the GV70, the smaller compact utility, is because the previous version of this car was the oldest vehicle in the Genesis lineup. It actually was running on the platform when it was the Hyundai Genesis, the very first Genesis. Now Genesis as a brand is only 4 years old as a separate entity outside of Hyundai, their premium division. And they've had great success with the G70 compact car, a sporty, well-equipped car with a lot of value, and now they have new models. This, the SUV, and there's more coming next year. There's going to be that smaller SUV that people are looking for called the GV70. So that new GV80 is based on this platform. So there are similarities between the two. You can see the design cues are very similar. The most prominent feature are the two lines that run from the headlamps down the side marker lights and into the rear tail lamps. And I think this is a really attractive look. I like the way they've taken something that is mandatory, like a side marker light, and integrated it into the design and made it a feature of the car. And also, if you look at the lines down the side of the car, there's this sweeping, flowing, elegant, even muscular attitude about the car that I think is right on. Now, the grille is certainly polarizing. Now, when I had a chance to drive the full-size Genesis, the G90 last year, some people joke that if you put the big S in the middle of the grille, it would look like the Superman crest. There was a lot of discussion when I picked this car up about where does the front license plate go, and it will take away from the oversized dramatic effect of the car, and Genesis has been smart not to put it on this car for my test drive. It is a striking looking car. I like the 5-spoke wheels. That's kind of a retro look these days, and I like a classic 5-spoke. But what they've done is that cross-hatch design you see in the grille, they call it G-Matrix, Genesis Matrix, is emulated throughout the car, and they even put it on the 5-spoke wheels. That's a nice little touch, but I think styling-wise, it's a win. Inside is a bit of a showcase. This really is where they're focusing their attention, and then we'll go for a drive. This video is brought to you by Car Cost Canada. Get the dealer's cost, list of rebates, plus discounted interest rates. Use the promo code MOTORMOUTH to become an expert member and get extra searches. The link is in the description below. So in Canada, it's just a two-trim approach for the G80. The lower horsepower turbo 4-cylinder engine with less features on the inside, or the higher horsepower turbocharged V6 engine with more features on the inside. And that's the one I'm in here. You can see this one gets the quilted Napa leather seats. It also gets the open pore wood. And these seats, by the way, have a massage function. It's not like a massage function you might have experienced in other cars. It's a real sort of ergonomic effort to sort of stretch your body out and move your body around on a longer trip so that you don't get numb legs or what have you. It's not really a deep sort of massage. It just moves you around and keeps you moving as you drive along. Also, depending on what mode you're in, the bolsters will come in and out. So in sport, the bolster's a little tighter, and comfort, they're obviously a little bit wider. And also, if you get this top model, you get a 3D instrument cluster, which is the first I've ever experienced. It's kind of different and very cool and not distracting. So what it has is 2 infrared beams that look at your eyes. So depending on if you're over here or over, say you're driving like this, it will calibrate that screen so that if you're driving like this, you'd still see it in 3D. And every once in a while, it looks a little bit blurry and then it snaps into focus again. If you stare at it long enough, it kind of looks 2D. And then if you glance at it quickly, it's 3D. It's interesting. What they're doing apparently is sending different information. You can see your eyes to your left and your right eye to give you this 3D effect without having to have glasses on. It's pretty cool. And is it worth it? I'm not sure, but it certainly isn't distracting to drive. It looks very neat. So that's what you get on the upgraded version with the more powerful engine. On the base model, you get a lot of what you see here. The big pano roof, you get heated seats, you get the beautiful 14.5-inch infotainment screen. That's the largest horizontal screen in the business. And other than the features I just mentioned on the top trim, it looks the same as this. Now, this infotainment system takes a while to get used to. So I've been driving this and the GV80, which have the same setup, for 3 days. And when I first got into this car and I picked it up and I was driving, had to drive a couple of hours outside of Toronto here, I thought it was a hot mess. And I was like, this is not intuitive at all. And I still stand by that. It's not intuitive. However, once you learn the system, it becomes a little bit better to integrate with. So what you have here is this knurled aluminum wheel in the center. Now that takes you from the home screen, which is this nice airy looking picture that they put on that big screen. And then you get into tiles, whether it's navigation or your phone or music or media, what have you. And so it seems to me that this seems to be a combination of a couple of different systems. So that tile layout is reminiscent of BMW. And this wheel is their own sort of structure. I would like the actual knurled aluminum piece to be raised up so you don't have to push the top of it to spin it. You could just spin it like you do the shifter. That would actually make more sense to me. And in the center is the trackpad and how you enter different functions. As I mentioned, it's a bit of a learning curve, but once you kind of get there, it does make a little bit more sense. I do find it kind of frustrating that you get to places you didn't intend to be and then you got to go back and start again. So it's a new take on an interface. And this is where a lot of brands really kind of lose me. Is like, why don't we just stick with what we know works? And they kind of have that as well. So it's a touch screen. So if you don't want to use that, you can just touch the screen. It's a bit of a reach from where the driver is. You can also use voice commands. And what I like around the HVAC system, there are still some hard keys there. So there are different ways to interact with it. You really do have to kind of master this wheel. You kind of get there, but trust me, there will be people that don't like it and there'll be people that love it. One thing I don't like the look of is the steering wheel, this sort of oval centerpiece. It's not sporty. I don't know, it looks kind of old manish. I don't know when, maybe it's with the open pore wood. Like they have the 5-spoke wheels on the outside of the car. I mean, a classic 3-spoke sort of sportier steering wheel, I think would make all the difference. That to me looks too soft, looks too generic, looks too geriatric, if you ask me. Now, I don't have the base model 2.5-liter turbo 4-cylinder with me today. However, I have driven it in the G80, the SUV I mentioned at the beginning. Once again, click on the card up here if you want to have a look at it, because it really is an interesting looking utility. And the power from that engine and the way it's matched to the transmission was surprisingly good. So just think about this. 300 horsepower from a 2.5-liter turbo 4-cylinder engine. And you get 311 pound-feet of torque. That's a pretty healthy output from a 4-cylinder turbo. Most cars from Germany, for example, their 2-liter turbos are right around 250 horsepower. So 300 is a good number. And just think about this. The last generation BMW inline 6-cylinder engines had 300 horsepower. So it's amazing to see how efficient car companies are becoming. Then you go up to the engine I'm driving here today, which is 3.5-liter twin turbo with 360 horsepower and 390 pound-feet of torque. So that's a lot of power in a mid-size sedan. The interesting thing is this car has sort of great low-end and mid-range torque, but at high-end passing power on the highway, it feels a little bit like it can kind of run out of breath once in a while. But for most of the driving that you do, that mid-range torque, it's really good. Both engines use an 8-speed automatic transmission, and in Canada, standard all-wheel drive. And this is a rear-wheel drive bias system developed here in Canada by Magna, the parts supplier. It's also the same all-wheel drive system that they supply to BMW. It's calibrated differently for Genesis. They have the ability to send up to 100% of the torque just to the rear wheels. It's typically only going to send at maximum 50% of the torque to the front wheels. It is truly that European style rear wheel all-wheel drive bias system. So both versions with the 4-cylinder or the 6-cylinder get different drive modes, sport, comfort, and eco. What you get though with the higher end trim with the 3.5-liter turbo is you get an adaptive suspension. So what that does is change the shock settings. In addition, there's a camera behind the rear view mirror here looking down the road for any bumps and inconsistencies, and what it does is it softens the suspension just as you're coming to those bumps, And when you get in a car that has it and you get in one that doesn't, there is a noticeable difference. The car without it is fine. It's a good balance of sportiness and premiumness, but this just makes it that much softer. And if you're looking for a smoother, more traditional luxury ride, then the 3.5 liter turbo is the one you're going to want. Now, I've had a chance to drive this car over 3 days. I picked it up here in Toronto, drove all the way up to Collingwood, drove it there and then drove it back, and now I'm driving it now for the 3rd day. And I'm impressed. I'm impressed with the power. I'm impressed with the handling. I'm impressed with the looks of this car. I'm getting better at the infotainment system, and I think probably a couple of weeks to really polish up your skills if you were going to have this car, to make yourself really comfortable with it. But it's a very well done product. They have got the interior fit and finish as high as you're going to get from any brand in this price range. It certainly has the power and the performance and a capable all-wheel drive system that people are looking for. But what Genesis has decided to do is take away the pain points of purchasing and owning a car for 5 years. So everything is included in the price. All you have to do is pick your color and pay the extra taxes. Other than that, it's all included for 5 years. So is that enough to get you away from the established brands from Germany for the most part? You tell me, what do you think? It's an interesting proposition. I think this is a better looking version than the old Genesis, but it's more expensive. That turbo 4-cylinder is $66,000, and the turbo 6-cylinder with the nicer interior, granted, is $76,000. Not an inexpensive, value-driven proposition anymore. So when it's competing on price with everything else, are those differentiators enough to get you to buy? So Genesis has this all-in pricing for 5 years. They valet the car to you when you get it. They valet the car from you when it needs to go for service. That's all included for 5 years. And that's included in the price of $66,000 if you want the turbo 4-cylinder, or $76,000 if you want this car with the 3.5 liter turbo. It's up to you. Do you think it's overpriced? If it's right priced? If this is going to be a hit? It's certainly going to be interesting to see what Genesis comes up with in the next couple of years. This video is brought to you by Car Cost Canada. Get the dealer's cost, list of rebates, plus discounted interest rates. Use the promo code MOTORMOUTH to become an expert member and get extra searches. The link is in the description below.